Had Savannah Sons with guest guitarist Kevin Allenson holding it down so that folks could come in, get seated, relaxed, get your bearings and get your free snacks over there on the table. And Brian can set you up with a beverage if you need that as well. My name is Tammy Gomez and I host Second Sunday Spoken Word, which happens on the second Sundays of every month. We try to make it easy for y'all so y'all know when it's happening. Mark that on your calendar, second Sunday every month. Mostly here at Arksmith Avenue. However, I'm going to say this multiple times tonight. Next month, June 2026, for second Sunday, we will be meeting at the Southside Preservation Hall in the Rose Chapel, which is a beautiful, beautiful venue. And Matthew, the executive director, can't wait to hear Savannah Sons, and so we got y'all covered, guys, so y'all have plenty of space and outlets to set up for playing for second Sunday in June, which will be at Southside Preservation Hall, which is kind of a stone's throw if you can really hurl a rock, right, Bruce? It's not that far from here. Or maybe Bruce can show up here and y'all can do a little caravan all the way. I mean, it's literally like 5 blocks from here. Really great venue, and looking forward to trying out a new space because next in June they're going to be having the postponed, rescheduled 3-day, I think it's a 3-day festival celebrating the music and legacy of Django Reinhardt, the beloved and famed and accomplished French guitarist musician. That's an annual festival that happens here, but because it was icy on the weekend that it was supposed to happen in January, they moved it to June, and so that's why we're getting bumped one time to a different space on June 14th, I believe is the date. Just to warm up the mic a little bit before our featured performer comes on, I will read this piece from a Central American poet who I think is under-recognized, Otto Rene Castillo. And happily, this book is bilingual. It's in Spanish and English, and I'll read the English poem, the translation. It Hurts Less Being Alone by Otto Rene Castillo. I believe that it hurts less to be alone with your memory, below this hard sky, below this thick wind, below sharp glances that ask, why do your hands suffer in the afternoons? Why don't you come without the blaze of her distant breast and enjoy yourself with us? That would be the power to tie up one's soul and renounce forever the place where the wind awaits me caressing your hair. You know it. With you, the world doesn't fit into my veins. But without you, I'm extremely small for this street of gray lips. Believe me, your absence burns. My love, and your memory hurts. For example, now I am the skeleton of a house on fire that aches inside a well of ashes. I scream, flames, take me with you anywhere. Don't leave me singed with rubbish. Take me on your shoulders because this calvaried memory of birds singing on my roof in the afternoon hurts me. And only smoke trails by my hands that plead without anyone listening. It's like this every day, my love. Believe me, my love, your memory hurts more than my conquered solitude. Otto Rene Castillo. So I would love to invite you, Granger, if you feel like this is the moment, this is the time.
Ready when y'all are.
And Granger Esch is a local theater performer, writer, elected director, and he's been performing and doing theatrical things on stages and in circus rings. Yes, believe it or not, Granger was once a clown with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. You get autographs later. And currently, bless his big heart, I mean really, bless your heart for doing God's work as a clowning professional at Cook Children's Hospital.
They call me Dr. Quack.
Dr. Quack. Granger set up an original, unprecedented theater company in Salado, Texas, which was partner at the time, and they had a good solid 10-year run, presenting plays and vaudeville performances. And now he's in Fort Worth, and you'll see him pretty often at the Hip Pocket. You're regularly out there doing cast. Are you acting and tech, or mostly?
No, I'm not as good at tech as the tech.
Oh, right, all right. Mostly just an actor. Today, we're hosting Granger as a writer and presenter of his one-man show or monologue. It's a 40-minute piece. After that, we will have a small break, intermission, and then we will follow that with our abbreviated open mic section. Thank you for signing up on the sign-up list. So Granger is going to tell us the title of the piece and launch right into it. If you're into taking photos or videos, I think that's welcome. This is the very first time for Granger to present this work, so let's show him some hearty Second Sunday spoken word love. Granger Esch.
Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm going to get right to it. How many dog lovers do we have out here? Okay, good. All right. I'm going to try to keep the eyes dry on some of this. But anyway, this guy right here is not only my best friend, he is my spiritual teacher. And over the past 2 weeks, this resilient little rat terrier has been giving me a crash course in what strength and endurance are all about, plus a few other virtuous qualities on the side. It was a crash course that began with an actual crash. I call it La Odisea de Pancho y su papá, or Poop in the Clutch. Saturday, July 27th, about 5 p.m., right in front of my house and right in front of my eyes, Pancho got run over by a small SUV going way too fast down a residential street. We had just pulled into my driveway, and as usual, I let him out of the truck, and usually I expected him to walk alongside me the 7 human steps to my front door, as he always does. But this time, I failed to notice that just across the street, someone was walking a large male dog, much larger than Pancho, and for whatever reason, call it a sporadic canine Napoleon complex. Pancho is often irresistibly compelled to give larger male dogs the what for, even though he's always courteous to the ladies. But by the time I saw the big dog, it was too late. Pancho commenced to bark and charged across the street as if he'd been shot out of a cannon. And at that time, for me, time slowed down to super slow-mo. I yelled, "No!" And I saw the approaching SUV on its collision course with my best friend, like a large meteor hurtling toward a little rocket ship. I was frozen with dismay. I couldn't move. I saw the bumper hit Pancho on his left side, knocking him head over heels and down hard to the asphalt, and landing on his right side. I heard the dull thud of whatever they make car bumpers out of these days against Pancho's shoulder. And then I heard Pancho's agonized yowl. And I witnessed the emptying of Pancho's bowels into the street as the vehicle literally knocked the shit out of him. Cringingly, I watched as it passed over Pancho's body, wondering if he was small enough not to be caught on the vehicle's underside and dragged along down the street with it. Fortunately, he was fine. But the SUV never stopped, never even slowed down, just kept on going. I was told later by neighbors who had witnessed the hit and run with a broader perspective that the driver made a quick right turn at the end of the block to duck out of sight. In retrospect, it actually seemed like a contract hit, as if Pancho would run afoul of some gang. But I know Pancho had no enemies. The next thing I remember is overcoming my temporary paralysis and running toward Pancho's body, not knowing if he was alive or dead. And I remember when I reached him and stood over him, being momentarily paralyzed myself, again with the fear of what I might discover when I knelt down to pick him up. So I sent up an instantaneous prayer that was instantaneously answered. Pancho moaned, such as I had never heard before, and his body shuddered. The spell was broken over me, though. I picked him up as gingerly as I could. Nevertheless, he yelped in pain as I lifted him up. That's when time resumed back to its normal pace. I cannot unsee or unhear what I've just described. Those sights, sounds, and thoughts are forever and embracably etched in super high def in the video files of my mind. Memories of what happened in the hours immediately after that moment, however, are spotty, jumbled, and out of sequence, and definitely in super low def. My mental state was one of shock, and my hard drive was haywire. Panic was taking hold of my brain. Sure, Pancho was alive, but for how long? Beyond the bruises, the road rash, and lacerations, what unseen injuries lay within? Broken bones, punctured lungs, spinal damage, internal bleeding. These monsters of worry began to prey upon my mind. Coming up right behind them was the big, ugly monster of guilt, saying, "This is all your fault. If only you'd put Pancho on a leash, even for the short walk to the front door. If only you'd taken the time to observe the larger dog across the street," and so on. Meanwhile, I was aware that there was at least a half dozen neighbors and witnesses who were shouting suggestions as to what animal hospitals might be open on a Saturday afternoon. But because of the clamoring monsters in my head, I couldn't process any of that information. But fortunately, my next door neighbor volunteered to get in my truck and ride shotgun with me and keep me sane and be my brain. I set Pancho down in the middle of old Betty Blue's bench seat and took off. Now, I don't know how fast I was driving, but my neighbor kept me from doing anything stupid. When we reached the suggested hospital that we deemed the closest, we found that it was indeed open on Saturday, but only until noon, which was 5.5 hours past. Panic flared and the tick-tock of time pounded in my head. I probably would have lost it right there if not for my neighbor, who knew another place that wasn't too far away, and he navigated me there. Meanwhile, Pancho was panting heavily, but neither moaning nor groaning. He never said a mumbling word. Like I said, he's tough. I was the basket case. And it got even basket casier when we pulled into the parking lot of the next hospital. It looked closed, and my heart sank. But then my neighbor saw a sign that said, "We've moved." They read aloud the new address. It was only a mile away. So we're back on the road, and we were there in 5 minutes. At 2 o'clock, it was 5 minutes. To me, it was an eternity. But we got there, and what a facility it was. It was a 24-hour emergency veterinary hospital called The Park. All well lit, modern looking, and huge on the scale of a large emergency clinic for humans. 2 stories. I parked as quickly as I could, picked up Pancho, who let out a short, painful yelp, and I carried him inside, where I handed him off to a nurse and began simultaneously explaining what had happened and filling out forms. Pancho was whisked away to be pumped up with fluids to combat his state of hypovolemic shock and to undergo a battery of tests. I was told by Dr. Morris, whom I met soon after, that it would take a few hours to get him stabilized and that they would call me when I could visit him. At first I didn't want to leave. I was determined to keep vigil as close to him as possible. And as I sat down on one of the cold, hard seats of the waiting area, 2 things dawned on me. One, my neighbor, who helped me get there, probably needed to get home. And 2, I was supposed to be running lights and sound for a burlesque show at Arts 5th Avenue at 8 o'clock. I still didn't want to leave, but then came to mind thing 3. There wasn't a damn thing I could do there in the waiting room anyway, except pray. And I could do that from anywhere. So I drove my neighbor home silently, praying along the way, and Then I went to Arts Fifth Avenue thinking that having a job to do would keep me from worrying myself sick. It was a foolish notion. To begin with, Deb and Gracie at A5A knew that I was in no condition to handle the responsibilities of light and sound cues. I was in shock. So much so that I had forgotten that on my way to the hospital, I had already left Deb a voicemail explaining what happened. They had my job covered, and I went home, picked up a book to read, and drove back to the hospital waiting room. I have no idea how long I waited there. Time stood still. I couldn't concentrate on whatever it was I was reading, so I gave it up and went back to praying and worrying. Eventually, though, a nurse came up to me and told me the test results would be ready soon, and that I could visit Pancho. Hallelujah, I thought, he's alive. She led me into the kennel room. Walls on either side were stacked with crates occupied by dogs and cats in various states of pain, distress, and sedation. At the back of the wall were pens for the big dogs. I didn't have to be led to Pancho. Somehow I just walked straight to the back left corner of the room, and there he was, in a stainless steel cage, all doped up, glassy-eyed, and mortified at having to wear one of those plastic lampshade collars. He wagged his tail when he saw me, and then attempted unsuccessfully to stand up. I grabbed a stool, pulled it up next to the cage, sat down, opened the cage, and rubbed his shoulders. He rolled over on his side, and for the first time I noticed that his usually pink belly was now all black and blue from the bruising and the road rush. It looked like burnt toast. We sat there, neither one of us saying much, until Dr. Morris came in and told me the test results were in. I said goodbye to Pancho and followed the doc to another room to view the x-rays. It was a long walk. I was terrified. What monsters would the x-rays reveal? But what Dr. Morris showed me was nothing short of miraculous. No spinal damage, no punctured lung, no internal bleeding, no broken ribs, legs, or hips. But then the doctor pointed out the dislocated right shoulder joint. Okay, I thought, that's kind of an easy fix, right? You just pop it back in, and that's exactly what the doctor said they intended to do. However, he said, pointing to a little white dot on the x-ray photo, there's this little broken off piece of bone here. Because of that, we can't be sure if the leg will stay in place. If it doesn't, we'll have to refer you to a surgeon. This news was disappointing, but not devastating. He had no life-threatening injuries. That was good enough for me at the time. And knowing that Pancho had a new lease on life, the joy and gratitude I felt chased away the monsters of my mind, at least for the time being. Dr. Morris said that they would try to reset his shoulder joint the next day, Sunday. And I thanked him and went back to the kennel room to spread the gospel to Pancho. His visage and manner of greeting me was the same as before. I told him, in Spanish of course, that I was sorry that I hadn't done what I should have done to prevent what happened to me. And then Pancho wagged his tail, in Spanish of course. Then I told him everything the doctor told me, and that he was going to be totalmente bien, completely okay, because he was el perrito más resistente del mundo, the toughest pup in the world. He wagged again, heaved a sigh, and rolled onto his side. I sat with him until the nurse on duty started dropping polite hints that visiting hours were over. It was after 10 o'clock. Then I said, hasta mañana, and went home to try to sleep, which, being physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, I accomplished with almost no effort at all. Sunday, July 21st. After church that morning, I went back to the hospital to see Pancho and to find out the results of his shoulder resetting procedure, and hopefully to bring him home. The doctor was ready to meet me upon my arrival and told me that the procedure had not been successful. Because of that little broken off bone fragment, Pancho's leg would not stay in place. Again, disappointing news, but not devastating. There was still hope for a normal life for Pancho. I was given a referral to a veterinary surgeon, Dr. Dean, at Fort Worth Veterinary Surgical. I was also given a bag of various pain-killing, inflammation-fighting, antibiotic, and sedative pills, with instructions as to how to administer them. I was disappointed that they didn't give me any. After a brief wait, Pancho was brought out to me, lampshade and all, to be taken home. I carried him back to my truck, and home we went. I carried him into the house, too. With his front leg still dislocated, his gait was a painful-looking limp. And for at least the next 48 hours, I wanted to try to keep him from overexerting himself. It became apparent within the next 2 hours that it would be no easy task. He did not want to stay in one place very long. He moved from the couch to the floor, to another chair, back to the couch, and over again. Perhaps this was because he was uncomfortable in any position, especially with that cockamamie lampshade collar on. So I relieved him of that cumbersome indignity right away, and I placed pillow landing pads at the base of the sofa and the chair and on the floor. I didn't want him spraining the ankle of his good leg while leaping to the floor on both of his front legs. But at this time, it occurred to me that perhaps he was uncomfortable because his pain meds were wearing off. But he wasn't due for another round until 8 p.m., so I thought it best to wait it out. I'm not a big fan of pain pills myself, and I certainly didn't want to overuse them in his case. When the time came, though, I wrapped his pills in some sliced turkey, fairly certain it would be difficult to get him to swallow them. He had always been a master at swallowing the meaty, cheesy wrapper and spitting out the pill that I gave him as flea and heartburn medicine. But this time, he swallowed the whole package willingly, which I took as a sign that he really needed it. There was another problem, though. I noticed that one of his lower canine teeth was broken and jutting out sideways from his mouth. I called the hospital, and I was told to bring him back in, back on the truck, and back to the park. There they removed the hanging dental fragment, but not the root, suggesting that I have that done while he was knocked out for his leg surgery. By the time we got home, the meds had taken effect, and Pancho slept until 4 a.m., which was when I had to wake him up for his antibiotic pill. It was at that time that he got his appetite. To my great relief, he heartily wolfed down a whole can of boiled chicken. Now we could both say. Monday, July 22nd. I called Fort Worth Veterinary Surgical and set up a consultation with Dr. Dean the next day. Pancho was not content to just lie around and mope, but I insisted on carrying him outside and back for potty breaks. He delivered every time. Tuesday, July 23rd. Consultation with Dr. Dean, surgeon, who looked and sounded exactly like an old-school Texas country veterinarian should. By his manner, I could tell right away that he was a straight shooter. He also took an immediate liking to Pancho, but no surprise there, everybody does. After examining Pancho and his x-rays, he told me that the floating bone fragment was indeed crucial to holding Pancho's leg in place, but it was also too small to fix, too tiny for screws or pins or plates. He gave me 3 options. Leave it as it is. Rat terriers are tough, he said, which I knew. And he'll adapt, but he will be in pain, and will need pain pills for the rest of his life. And needless to say, I didn't like option 1. Then there was option 2. Fusing the joint, meaning his leg will be rendered immobile in the socket with screws and plates. Then I pictured Pancho hobbling on an atrophied, immobile, useless appendage that used to be a leg. That too was a non-starter. Number 3, amputation. He didn't offer any explanation of that. Of course, he didn't have to. I waited a few seconds for an option 4, but there wasn't. I was crestfallen and incredulous. I pressed him once more. There's really no way to fix that bone. He looked me solemnly in the eye and shook his head. If it were your dog, I asked, what would you do? Again, looking me right square in the eye and without the slightest hesitation, he said, amputation. All right then, I said, after swallowing a ginormous lump in my throat. I shook his hand and went to see his receptionist and schedule a procedure while I waited for the nurses to bring Pancho out. August 1 was the agreed upon date. I fought back tears as I drove Pancho home. There were no tears from Pancho, no groans, not a hint of self-pity. Never said a mumbling word. Tuesday, July 23rd through Wednesday, July 31st. I had a few challenges to tackle in the ensuing week. Firstly, I had 1 week to make absolutely certain that there really was no other option that might restore his leg to full and painless functionality. I contacted a couple of other vets recommended by friends. I emailed Pancho's x-rays to them, but their responses offered no surgical alternative, just estimates for amputation. Secondly, I was committed to teach at Tiffany Schreiner's Imagineer Arts Academy Day Camp in Salado for a couple of days at the end of the week. I knew I had to take Pancho with me, but I worried as to how he would handle all the overt attention of so many puppy-loving kids who would inevitably invade his personal space at a time when he might be understandably irritable. But I needn't have worried. There was a utility room in the back of the venue where the day camp was held. There, Pancho had a safe space to retreat to when he was overloaded with adoration. And he handled himself admirably when he was out amongst the clamoring kitty crowd. Never snarled, never snapped, never said a mumbling word. A third dilemma looming on the horizon was the upcoming vacation to New England with my dad and brother, August 8th through 15th. Although I look forward to my time with them, I had misgivings about leaving Pancho so soon after the amputation. I certainly didn't want to board him in some cold, sterile kennel, and although I have friends whom I trust to look after him under normal circumstances, I didn't want to lay on them the added responsibilities of his medical regimen and other special needs. This was a job for a professional, but it would have to be one who could give him some love. Tiffany helped me find that professional. She encouraged me to contact Terry Swanson, a former neighbor of mine from my Salado days, who, as I had forgotten, is proprietor of All Creatures Hyperbaric Care. Perfect. Pancho could be boarded there within a half mile of our former home and receive hyperbaric oxygen treatments to help him heal. So I called Terry. She was certainly willing to accommodate Pancho, but unfortunately not able, as she was booked solid with boarders during my vacation time. For a moment, I felt defeated again. But then she told me to call her business partner, Susan Lowry, who operated the All Creatures facility in Elgin, Texas, about 50 miles south of Salado. With renewed hope, I thanked her and called Susan. For a moment, I felt foiled again, as Susan told me that she too was booked up. But then she said she'd be glad to make room for Pancho in her house. Although we had never actually met, I could tell just by what she said and how she said it that she could give Pancho the loving attention I wanted for him, along with the therapy. And that was definitely worth the extra 50 miles. Also, while I was in Salado, by chance I met someone who unwittingly put a silver lining on the dark cloud of Pancho's lost limb. After a full day at day camp, I went to Barrow Brewery for some liquid refreshment. There, I met and talked with a lady named Sharon Douglas, the mother of one of the proprietors of Barrow, K.D. Hill. I told her that I worked as a therapeutic clown at Cook Children's Medical Center, whereupon she asked me if Pancho ever made the rounds with me. I told her no, he did not, because he would have to go through a long and expensive training program to be certified as a therapy dog. She then told me that she worked with an organization called Pet Partners, which certifies dogs for pet therapy on a volunteer basis. And the process is neither long nor expensive, and that, as an amputee, Pancho would make an excellent therapy dog. She also told me that Pet Partners has a chapter in Fort Worth. I began to see that Pancho's loss was not merely a handicap, but perhaps a higher calling. Although Pancho probably would not be allowed to accompany me on my clown rounds, he and I could be part of a team of volunteers that help people heal. With problems potentially solved and new hopes established, Pancho and I returned to our home in Fort Worth. Over the weekend, my only worry was that Pancho had not pooped in a couple of days. So I took him to Lisa's Fried Chicken. And I got one of our favorite treats we like to share, a big box of fried chicken livers to go. And to go, he did. Pretty quickly, yeah. Thursday, August 1st through Tuesday, August 6th. I took Pancho to Fort Worth Veterinary Surgical with 4 legs, one of them bad. Picked him up 4 hours later with 3 legs, all of them good. Also, got a new regimen of painkillers, inflammation fighters, sedatives, and antibiotics. And another cockamamie lampshade collar, even bigger and more uncomfortable than the previous one. When we got home, I took it off Pancho and found that Pancho's tongue and teeth couldn't reach his sutured incision anyway, so the collar stayed off. Dr. Dean had also extracted the root of Pancho's broken tooth. Spent the rest of the day just chilling. Over the next 6 days, Pancho showed me his true hero nature. His resiliency and determination to do things for himself was phenomenal. The very next day, he climbed a full flight of stairs up to my bedroom and then leaped up onto the bed while I was taking a shower. The next day, he was leaping up onto the bench seat of my truck in a single bound. When I took him for short walks to relieve his bladder, he kept wanting to go further, although I could tell he was a bit winded. I couldn't help but notice that he had not yet regained the vigor and vitality, the puppy-like pep he had before he got creamed by the car. I suspected that a major source of that delay was the drugs he had to take. Another one of the side effects was constipation. I got worried again when Pancho hadn't pooped in 3.5 days. Tried chicken livers again, which we enjoyed, but they didn't do the trick this time. So the next day I consulted the internet, which told me to try canned pumpkin. I went to the Fiesta Mart and I got a can of pumpkin, brought it home, and put some in Pancho's bowl. I was really surprised at how quickly he took to it. He wolfed it down like chicken liver, but I was even more surprised by how quickly it took to him. Within 2 hours, he was ready to go. But there was still one physical challenge he had yet to master, although he was slowly improving. He would lose his balance a bit when he hikes his back leg to mark his territory. He still struggles with it to this day. He doesn't fall over completely, but I can see that it vexes him a bit. I'm confident that this too he will overcome. Still, I'm looking into getting him a pair of front leg wheels so he can take longer walks with less stress. Wednesday, August 7th through Thursday, August 15th. Pancho and I saddled up in Old Betty Blue and made a 170-some-odd mile trip south. In the rural outskirts of Elgin, we found the home of Susan and All Creatures LLC, nested on several shady acres of Texas Hill Country beauty. As we pulled up amidst the welcoming barks of her other canine guests, Susan, with silver hair and a sunshine smile, came out of her house to greet us. The positive energy of the place and our host was palpable. Although we were shaded by the venerable live oaks and pecans, the scene was all cool sunshine. I knew then and there this was Pancho's role. After a quick tour of the grounds, including the hyperbaric room, a little meeting in the kitchen to get Susan up to speed on Pancho's food and medicine regimen, a little friendly chit-chat, and a photo or two, I said goodbye to nurse and patient and said a little prayer of hope and thanksgiving as Betty Blue and I took off for home. The next day, my father, my brother, and I took off for Boston, where we were scheduled for our annual family vacation. We saw a couple of games at Fenway Park. We took a sightseeing tour of Boston, visited the Kennedy Library, and then we rented a car to explore New England. But I thought about Pancho throughout. But this time I didn't worry. Susan kept me updated by text and photos. And when I called 2 or 3 times, she would hold the phone up to Pancho's ear so I could talk to him. She said he perked up and wagged his tail when he heard my voice. Friday, August 16th. The day after our return from New England, Betty and I headed south, bound for Elgin and Pancho. I was giddy with the prospect of our dog and his boy reunion. About halfway there, though, I realized that I had forgotten to bring my checkbook, and Susan doesn't take plastic. I called to tell her, and she said that was all right, I could mail it to her. Other than that, it was all smooth sailing until I got to the town of Taylor, about 20 miles north of our destination. Cruising down Taylor's main drag, I saw a thrift store that I had noticed on my previous trip the week before. This time I decided to pull over and check it out. I found a straw hat, and a pair of swim trunks that I walked out of the store with for the princely sum of $2.48 with tax. I was feeling fine when I walked back across the street to my trusty truck. I got in the cab, shut the door, put the key in the ignition, stepped on the clutch, turned the key, and mashed on the foot feed. Her engine seemed to be starting just fine, but as she did, old Betty lurched forward in three violent jerks and then died. 25 years and 353,000 miles, old Betty's clutch had cashed in its chips. I knew it right away, although I didn't want to admit it to myself. That clutch had been living on borrowed time for years. It was about 104 degrees in Taylor on that day, but with the wind chill factor, it felt like 108. I looked underneath the chassis and saw a big puddle of .3 clutch fluid on the pavement. With the principle of try the easiest, cheapest possible solution first in mind, and before I went to all the effort of looking up a number for a local towing service, I walked up a couple of blocks to a gas station to buy some more .3. As you've probably guessed, and as I really suspected deep down, if I'm honest, refilling the clutch fluid reservoir didn't really do the trick. But how stupid would I have been if I'd gone with all that expense of getting a tow when 2 blocks of walking and $3 of clutch fluid would have got me back on the road. While I was looking for a tow service on my phone and sweating profusely, a nice lady who worked at the finance company I had parked in front of, who had seen my suffering, brought me a glass of ice water and gave me the phone number of a reliable tow man. Kindness of strangers is a wonderful thing. I called Randy's wrecker service. Then I called Susan to tell her I was stranded. She said she'd come up and get me, and she recommended a reliable mechanic in Taylor. I called him, told him what happened, and he told me to bring it on up to City Auto Service, just 5 or 6 blocks up the road, and he'd see what he could do. The tow truck arrived within a few minutes, and while Randy was getting Betty hitched up, a big, smiling, homeless guy, dressed all in white, and pushing a cart filled with window washing supplies and a few personal items, came bopping down the middle of Main Street with a wave and a friendly howdy-do to everyone he passed. He stopped to chat with Randy for a while, and Randy good-naturedly bantered with him while he continued to hitch Betty. And then, as this oddly familiar stranger ambled toward me, I could see that his smile was not fake. There was a bona fide, blissful beatitude behind it. He greeted me as if he knew me, gave me a hearty handshake, looked me in the eye, and offered his sympathy for the predicament I was in. Then he asked me if I knew Jesus, and he asked me if I knew that all was spirit, and that there was nothing else. And I said yes, and yes indeed. Then he handed me a pink flyer advertising his window cleaning service, and asked if I could spare him any change. I reached into my front pocket, pulled out the $2.58 change from the thrift store, which was all the cash I had, and I put it in his hand. Whereupon he hugged me and he said, "Lord be with you." I looked him in the eye, which was neither dilated nor bloodshot, and said, "And also with you." Then he continued on his way, all smiles and waves. I wondered if I had just seen an angel. About that time, Randy said, "We're ready to go." I climbed into the cab of the tow truck, and we reached City Auto Service in less than 5 minutes. Randy said the towing fee would be added to my repair bill, and he wished me luck. I walked into the air-conditioned office waiting room and waited to see the receptionist who was tending to a couple of customers, one of whom was an old Air Force veteran who was talking to a younger fellow about what a rip-off today's automobiles are. I chimed in with an amen, and the veteran and I became fast friends. When I told him how long Betty had gone without needing a clutch job, he smiled, nodded, and said, "Yep, don't make him like that anymore. You got your money's worth, son." We talked for a while about other things. He mentioned that he had been stationed in Japan for a few years. I said, "Oh yeah? I lived in Japan for 6 months." "Air Force?" he asked. "Nope, circus." And he let out with a big Herman Munster laugh as the receptionist signaled that she could talk to me now. This was when I learned that the shop was not open on Saturdays. And seeing as it was getting close to 4 o'clock, 1 hour from closing time, that they probably wouldn't even have a look at Betty until Monday. This was disappointing news, as I had a Sunday morning gig, a film shoot back in Fort Worth. I whipped out my phone and started looking for car rentals in Taylor. There was one, Enterprise. I looked at their website and found that I could rent an economy car for the whole weekend for $75. Not bad, considering it was my only option. I was fixing to call their office when Susan called to tell me that she was on her way and asked how things were going. I explained my dilemma vis-a-vis no truck till at least Monday. Then, before I could even mention renting a car, she said, "Why don't you just take my Prius?" "Well, thanks, but no, oh, it's no trouble," she said. "I don't have to be anywhere but home for the next few days, and if I do, there's my truck, which is a little iffy, but it'll get me there." Well, I think about it, and I'll see you in a little while. And then she hung up. Think about it, I did. I thought, here's a person, doesn't hardly know me from Adam. A person who allowed his dog to get hit by a car. There's that guilt monster again. Yet she's offering me her car, her good one, not for just a day, but for the whole weekend and then some. And not just to drive around town, but to take 200 miles away, and Lord knows where else. I was overwhelmed by the kindness and trust behind her gesture, and I was humbled by it. Then I remembered I had forgotten to bring my checkbook to pay for her invaluable life-restoring services to my best friend. Taking her car would be too much. I decided I would just tell her thanks but no thanks and ask her to take me to the Enterprise office, which was only a couple of miles away. Within about 20 minutes, she arrived at the garage with her golden Prius and her sunshine smile. I told her about my decision to rent a car. She asked me if I was sure, and I said yes. And without any further argument, she drove me to the Enterprise office. She waited in the Prius while I went inside. She didn't have to wait long. I walked in, said, "I'd like to rent a car," and without hardly looking up, a busy-looking managerial type fellow said, "Sorry, we don't have any cars available until tomorrow." I walked back out, got in the Prius and said, "Well, still want to let me borrow your car?" She replied with a genuine hearty laugh and told me the offer still stood. And we hit the road back to Elgin and Pancho. I can't remember when I felt so blessed. We got to her house. She went in ahead of me and let Pancho out of his pen in the kitchen. He ran. Yes, he actually ran up to greet me as he hadn't done since before the accident. He reared up on his hind legs and leaned onto my knee with his front paws, only this time it was only one paw. Aside from the missing limb, he was his old self again. Puppy pep was back, and I sat down on the floor to wrestle with him like we hadn't done since that day. Susan showed me that he'd finished all his pills, except for one remaining antibiotic, and gave me back what was left of his food, and we went back outside. Susan went over a few things about the Prius, including the fact that the right rear tire had a slow leak. And then she showed me a mini air compressor that she carried with her. When she tried to demonstrate it, though, it didn't work. But I told her I'd keep an eye on all the tires, and I could always get a free air at a quick trip. I also told her I'd be sure to have my checkbook with me when I came back to return her car and pick up Betty. After a heartfelt thank you, goodbye, and a hug, I drove away with Pancho, my navigator, in the shotgun seat. I must say, I was pleasantly surprised by the Prius's performance. Handled well, got great gas mileage out of its little 10-gallon tank, had more pep than I expected, more leg and headroom than I expected, and best of all, the air conditioner worked. We got home with no trouble and no sweat. Over the weekend, that golden go-kart, as I came to call it, got me to my gig and everywhere else I needed to go. I came to grow rather fond of it, actually, but I missed Betty. On Monday, while I was at work at Cook Children's, I got a voicemail from City Auto to let me know that they were looking at her that day, but she wouldn't be ready for pickup. Maybe tomorrow, but more likely Wednesday. I texted Susan and let her know, and she replied that that would be all right. I was scheduled to work again on Wednesday, so I arranged to swap shifts with one of the other clowns so I could work on Tuesday instead. When Wednesday morning came around, I called City Auto and they said it probably wouldn't be ready until Thursday. Texted Susan again to let her know. She replied that would be all right. Then at 5:30 p.m. that same day, half an hour before closing time, City Auto called me again to tell me that Betty was ready. I reminded them that I was 170 miles away in Fort Worth and would pick it up tomorrow. I texted Susan a third time to let her know, and for the third time she replied that would be all right. Thursday, August 23rd. Pancho and I arose early and got aboard the Golden Go-Kart. Before we left the house, I checked the tires, and I decided I might ought to check the oil. Thank God that thought occurred to me, because when I pulled out the dipstick, she was darn near bone dry. Wouldn't it have been a fine way to wrap up this saga with Susan's engine seizing up on a lonely stretch of I-35? I had some 5W30 oil, but these hybrid engines require a grade of oil I'd never heard of, OW20, as I found out from the Prius's owner's name. Unfortunately, I didn't have another vehicle with which to go acquire this strange lubricant, but fortunately, there was an AutoZone about 5 minutes from my house. I was pretty sure I could make it there safely with what I had, but just in case, I prayed before I started her up. Pancho did too. Luck and the Lord were with us. We made it to the zone where I bought 2 quarts of the stuff and put 1.5 in Little Goldie. We drove first to City Auto, where I paid and picked up Betty, leaving Goldie in the parking lot. Then we got aboard Betty, and she carried us the rest of the way to Elton. It felt so nice to have the family back together again, Pancho and Betty and me, and all of us with renewed health. Pancho's physical, Betty's mechanical, and mine mental. When we reached Susan's place, she was out in her yard to greet us. Pancho moved over to the middle of the bench seat and let Susan ride shotgun. Betty took us back to City Auto, where Susan was reunited with Goldie, and I remembered to write her a check. For all she did for Pancho and for me, it was a bargain. As the old Air Force veteran at City Auto said, got your money, son. Another round of hugs and goodbyes, and Betty carried us home. Epilogue. I reckon this is the part where I tell the moral of the story. Problem is, I can't really narrow it down to just one. I've learned so much through this month-long odyssey about perseverance, resilience, kindness, saying prayers, and counting blessings. Here's what I learned. Principle 1, write it down, whatever it is. Number 2, leash your dog in the city, even for short distances. Number 3, when a neighbor or a stranger offers help, take it, then wait for opportunities to pay it forward. Number 4, miracles happen, acknowledge them with gratitude. Number 5, sometimes everything just seems to fall into place, let it. Number 6, a sudden loss might just be a higher call. Number 7, when your dog has a clog, pumpkin's quicker than liver. Number 8, angels walk among us, but don't look for wings and halos. They're not that obvious about it. Number 9, check your oil regularly and your tires. You could be avoiding disaster. Number 10, praying can be done anywhere at any time. When there's faith behind it, it works. And finally, number 11, dogs are awesome. And so are old trucks. If you're lucky enough to have either one,